Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's SIG scheduling meeting. And this meeting is being recorded, so be aware of what you are saying and be respectful to each other. And let's dive into the agenda. The first one is that I found that there is some misleading feature name which is in conflict in the code implementation and the cap about the random replica set downscale. So in the cap, the feature gate was named random replica set downscale, but in the code implementation, I'm not supposing that this is the only implementation, but there is some misleading in the feature names. So in the code implementation, we have a logarithmic scale down feature gate. So this is kind of misleading. So I suppose we need to, I guess the code implementation has been there. We cannot change that. So one solution is that to update the cap to make them the names, feature gate names consistent. And also Mike mentioned to me that that is not a Kubernetes/website PR yet to introduce this new feature gate. So I suppose we should do that. So Mike, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think you explained it pretty well. Like we called the cap originally random replica set downscale, and then that was my fault that I named the actual feature gate logarithmic scale down. And like you said, being past code freeze at this point, I don't think that we can change the feature gate name. So probably bringing the cap to that consistency would be right. And then the other thing that you said, the PR to actually document the feature gate. We had a PR to update the descriptions, which I think everyone saw and reviewed, but I wasn't aware if we need to actually make a document somewhere like updating the list of feature gates, or if that's the kind of thing that gets done automatically if someone else is parsing like all the feature gates that are in package features and doing something with that. So I'm not sure who to talk to about that. Probably like the docs.
You have to add it yourself in the website PR. So just add it to the same PR because it's not merged, right?
I don't think it merged yet. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and then you can submit a separate PR for updating the cap.
Yeah, I'm just checking right now. I think that docs PR might have actually merged already.
Yeah, you can submit another one then.
Yeah,
but
another one.
You have to include the feature gate manually.
Okay. Yeah, what's the page? No, you can send it to me offline, but what's the page that needs to be updated for that? Is there like a central list of all the feature gates, or do we just update the description that we had there to say like as of 121, this alpha feature gate enables you to do this?
Yeah, there is a sample. There is also a new feature gate called prioritize the node capacity issue. So I guess you can refer to that. There, okay. It also introduced, but I can't find out what's the website PR there. But yeah, usually there's a couple of pages you can introduce a new feature gate that give a very short description.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can just find an example of one of the other ones that we've done recently.
It's just one, and I put the link to the in the chat. I put a link to the page.
Oh, yep, I see that. Okay, great. Yeah, I'll get a PR for that then too if the other one has already merged. I just didn't see it right now. I have a whole bunch of PRs open. But yeah, good catch. I'll update that.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Yep.
And in addition to this, I suppose there's no items needs to be discussed in this meeting. If you have, just bring them up, and because next I will give a very short 121 release retrospective. Yeah, if you have any items, just bring them up. Otherwise, I'm going to the 121 retrospective. Let's go over them one by one. The first one is that in the very beginning, we want to take some topology thread constraint into consideration when do scaling down. But after investigation, we found that the cost is somewhat ineligible. So we transferred to another solution, which is provided by Mike, is to give some logarithmic algorithm to sort the available paths into buckets. So it's not using the original algorithm to choose the path to scale down. So I would say it's, although not perfect, but comparing to the efforts, if we want to do it in the best case to solve the topology scale down case, so maybe the current solution is the most ideal way. Yeah,
so we discussed this with SIG apps, and they were basically opposed to making the replicas controller aware of scaling algorithms. So basically they said if we start checking this API, then we have to add checks for other APIs such as
that is a lot of burden for them.
Yeah. So they basically said no to specifically looking at this API. So this solution is kind of like a workaround that still fits within the old algorithm. And of course we have the other feature, which is more generic, that people can use to
exactly. So current solution is mitigation. Is, well, it cannot perfectly solve the case, but can mitigate the worst case. And also, as Abdullah mentioned, and we provide somewhat a hook called path deletion cost annotation in this, and so that you can implement your implementation to apply this kind of annotation so that the controller manager is aware of the extra factor you apply into this kind of path when doing the path scale down. So this is kind of an extension you can leverage to impact the path scale down. So it can work more generic, and we can evaluate the how it performs. This is basically a generic solution to resolve all scale down imperfections. This is for this. And the second one is we are continuously to sort of refactor our scheduled code base, and so that, for example, each plugin implementation can be extracted out into the staging, so that building entry and external out of tray plugins can be more easier, and also can get our code base more neat. This is the second one. I guess in the next couple of release, we are continuing working on this.
So sorry, before you go on, is the first feature enabled by default? What's the status there? Is it in alpha?
What do you mean by the first feature?
The first feature. Is
this
enabled
feature? No, it's the implementation is the logarithmic scale down, right? But the feature case is still in alpha, so not being enabled by default.
So the feature case is alpha?
Yes.
Yes, I made that alpha.
Okay, then just put that in the doc.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you.
And the third one is that Abdullah introduced a namespace selector to part affinity terms. So in the before, you can only specify list of namespaces into pod affinity or pod entity. Thanks to Abdullah, you now can use the label selector to select which namespaces you want to limit this kind of pod affinity constraints. And also the existing namespaces will be ended with the namespace selector. If I'm wrong, just correct me, Abdullah.
Yeah, that's good. The plan is to graduate to beta in the next release. The main thing that I need to add is a benchmark. It shows, like I have done some local benchmarking, but I want to merge a new benchmark. It shows that if you have like a massive number of namespaces that you're selecting, it's still going to be okay.
Yeah, sounds good. And also the namespace selector, I suppose, is also applied to the, what's that called? The pod affinity code or something? Yeah, because
right, it's quota scope. There is a new quota scope that allows administrators, operators to control who can use this cross namespace, feature in pod affinity. Because if you can't control that, then there's a chance, for example, like and you have a multi-tenant cluster, one tenant could basically impact the scheduling of other tenants, right? Like by creating pods with anti-affinity to every single namespace. And so,
yeah, sure. And the next item is to do some refactoring on the enqueuing mechanics of scheduler. So basically, in the before, we move paths from the unscheduling queue to active queue or backup queue unconditionally upon some system level events. But that is too aggressive. So sometimes if you have a lot of pending high priority paths, that kind of unconditional move can block the low priority paths to getting attempted. So that is not ideal. So in this release, we introduced the extension, not strictly extension point, but extension interface called in-queue extensions. And there is one functions you can implement called events to register. So this basically works like when a pod failed upon scheduling, the pod will carry the plugins it failed by. And also in the scheduling framework side, it has the global information about which plugin is interested in which events. So it can compare to the failed plugins unscheduled pod fail by and do an intersection. So if that match, I will say, okay, this pod can be moved upon this kind of system event. So this basically works like this. But unfortunately, we only completed, I think, half of the overall items. And the interface and in the scheduling framework has been merged. And in terms of the plugin implementations, there's only one called no resources has been merged. So the other ones will be merged in 122. And also because the interface has been introduced to the scheduling framework, that means if you vendor the 121 release in your out of tree plugin, you can enjoy the benefits. Yeah, this is the one item we want to continue in 122. And also, okay, I will mention the other item later. And also, next one is deprecate some custom plugins as well as raising the scheduling CC version to Viva Beta 2. We cannot obtain them in the current release. So this year, I think there is ongoing PR is almost ready, and which will handle in 122. So this is the CC Viva Beta 2. And next one is that Also, I did here introduce some operators into the scheduler integration performance test. This has been done so you have a more descriptive way to describe what kind of workload you want to run the benchmark test. The next one is about the extract, assume, and forget logic into a reserve unreserved plugin. We failed to obtain that. And also extension point for more explicit way for the out of tree plugins to do pod in queue. So this is not finished yet. Next one is to prefer nominated node when scheduling a pod. So the background is that when we do preemption, we update the pod status dot nominate node name, right, for the preemptor pod. And in the next scheduling cycle, we know, okay, this kind of pod has already experienced a scheduling attempt, and they are more, so they are basically has been pre-attempted and already has some candidate. So in the next scheduling cycle, instead of re-evaluating all the possible nodes, we will take preference on the nominated node name it carries. So it saves us a lot of processing cycles. So this is the one feature gate we introduced in 121. There is a feature gate you can remember which feature gate it is. Yeah, you can refer to this invitation and check out the features called prefer nominate node. Yeah, if this is enabled, we will take preference on the pod.status.nominate node name. Okay, this one we have completed. And the next item is some internal options needed by the external users, like on scheduling queue time interval. So it makes sense because we also did that for the back off queue, timeout, etc., etc. So in this, we tried to obtain this in this release, but you cannot catch the release date. So the PI is ready, and you will be merged in the next release. The final one is co-owned with SIG storage. The background is that when a pod requested for some volumes, right now we don't take preference on which node. If a couple of nodes has available capacity of the volumes, we don't take preference. But in this release, we introduced a feature gate to prioritize the node with the minimum volume capacity. So you can check out the peers, and so this may save you volume capacity, because if a very large, let me check here, volume capacity priorities, you can leverage this if you have some fitting, you want to sort of optimizing the volume fitting issues. You can leverage this. So this is basically a very short retrospective for this release, and I will go to the next release. So, sorry. And in terms of the alpha features, right now we have 3. If I missed someone, just let me know. I think Abdullah mentioned we like to go with beta in 122 for this feature, right?
Yep.
Okay. And the Chen is not here, so I will talk to him to see whether he wants to, or if needed, to promote to beta in next release. And also, Fu is not here yet. Also, I will talk to him. And in terms of the Viva Beta 2 API, as well as some other features which it depends or associated with the API. I think they will graduate along with the scheduling component config API. So Aditya, I think, has already ready PR, and we might go to Viva Beta 2 on the component config API, and also he has some deprecating logic to deprecate some plugins like service affinity and node label. Okay, and yeah, Abdullah also has the item called wants to unifying all the node resources scoring plugins so that we can have one unified plugin and with different arguments to unify the behavior. So maybe in the next release, it can be an alpha candidate. How do you think?
Maybe, yeah. I will confirm next week.
Yeah, sure. I just list the question mark here. Okay, and Jan and Mike will continue to work on refactoring the call dependency out of the framework. And also I talked to Alex on this item. He will very likely to obtain this in 122 release. And also I will continue to work on the fine-grained part in queuing in the scheduler. And also I list some other requirements here, like we may want to bring up with the mechanics to register the event handlers for call APIs dynamically. So right now we just unconditionally register them like PVC, PV, pod, node, right? But like for service, we may choose to opt out. But how we choose these kind of mechanics is we might want to bring up with the mechanism for its dynamic registering, right? And also like CSI has some CSI specific events. So I want that to opt in or opt out very dynamically instead of just hard coded them or have the if else logic of doing that. That's one thing I want to handle in 122. And also in terms of CRDs, we may also want to include them so that out-of-tree plugins can join the benefit, because out-of-tree plugins can have their specific CRD. And so upon a CRD events, they may want to move the unscheduling part back to the active queue. So this is another thing I want to include into. And also, Abdullah mentioned that we may want to come up with some metrics to reflecting the status of the pod having not been moved or having moved by the cluster event, so that we know that comparing to the previous implementation, how it behaves and how it performs. And this is observability metrics. So this is the things I want to include in the next release. Hope we can do that. And also this kind of thing has been, I think this one has been, yeah, this is another one. So yeah, I want to consider it also in next release. And also we may have some requirements from the sub project. So Mike, I just list the scheduling plugin requirements. If you have some, like in this scheduler, you can also list that here. So one item I want to include is that, so for now, in the framework handle, we just expose the client side to both in-tree plugin and out-of-tree plugins. But in some cases, we need the kubeconfig to build a sort of particular client instead of core client side to manipulate the core API resource. We also we want to build some external client to operate with the particular CRD. So one thing I want to leverage is that we may come up with the client builder. Oh, it's not shared. So basically, I want to come up with some client builder into the interface so that the auto tree can use that client builder to build their external client to operate with the CIDs. Right now, the workaround is very ugly. They have to provide the kubeconfig path again as the plugin arguments if they want to use CID. So that's a very ugly and inconvenient. So this is basically our very rough plan for the next release. If you have some items you want to bring up to the table, yeah, just bring up or ping us on the Slack.
Yeah, I like having the sub-project requirements here. I think that there's a couple stuff from the descheduler that we could add in. I think one thing would be the we're almost out of time, but the event-based descheduling, similar to what you guys were working on with the unschedulable queue being triggered on specific events, is one thing that I'd like to do more with in the descheduler. I think Sean's on the call. There's probably a couple different features that we could be targeting for the release, but we can just add those to the spreadsheet instead of keeping everyone on for more time to talk about them.
Sure. Okay, and if you have some other items we can discuss, we have already used up the time. So yeah, I think that's it pretty much for this week's meeting. And any problem, just contact us via the mailing list or Slack. And thanks for joining today's meeting. I will see you in the next week after. Yeah, thank you for everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.